Hey guys, what's up? It's Vampire Bride. I decided to go through all of my games and figure out which of my games have the lowest scores on Metacritic, and check those out to kind of see if I agree with the score they received or not. Before I get started, I want to say that quite a few games in my collection were marked as TBD or to be determined, so I will not be including those in this video. Also, there were a couple of games that I couldn't find at all on Metacritic, such as the PS1 game Morty the Chicken and also Tiny Toons Adventures Plucky's Big Adventure. So, obviously those games can't be included either. But I'll show you what I did get. Keep in mind with most of these games, I just played enough of the game to get a feel for it. I in no way completed most of these games. The first game I'm going to mention is the 5th lowest Metacritic scoring game of my collection, meaning that it's the highest scoring game of the games I'm talking about on this list. First, we're talking about The Walking Dead Survival Instinct on the Xbox 360, which scored a 32 on Metacritic. Okay, I can definitely see why this one is on the list. This is only a 5 to 6 hour game, and honestly, I didn't make it very far into it, even though I've been interested in trying it out for a while after watching the TV show. For this game, you play as Daryl, who is a well-loved character from the show. Throughout the game, you of course fight off walkers while trying to complete tasks. You are looking for Daryl's brother Merle, and then continue on completing various missions while trying to survive the walkers. The story isn't very good. The controls are, I guess, decent, but the combat with a knife is pretty terrible and often leads to loss of health and even death, making the game very aggravating. Sports drinks and power bars can be found throughout. Drinking and eating these replenishes your health. I love the show, but I think they could have made a much better game out of it. I guess that's a topic for another day. That is, if I ever decide to pick this game up and continue it. Next we have The Simpsons Wrestling, which also scored a 32 on Metacritic. I didn't really care for this game, but something really cool about it is there's 20 characters, and they are all voiced by the same voice actors that are in the show. There are a few odd and unique moves in the game, such as one character burps and deals damage, or can hit you with a beer cup. Other than that, everything is extremely limited. Controls are terrible even for a PlayStation 1 era game, and there's just not much to it at all. There are options to adjust the music, effects, and voice sound volumes though. So that's something, right? This game is considered to be one of the worst video games of all time. That being said, it can be a bit of fun when playing in 2-player. And people that got it around the time that it came out did really seem to enjoy it. Next, we have Jumper, Griffin's Story on the Xbox 360, which scored a 29 on Metacritic. This is a short 3.5 hour game. The story doesn't make much sense, especially if you haven't seen the movie or read the book. Basically, you play as Griffin, who is pursuing paladins and learning to cope with the death of his parents. The tutorial is way too specific. It does make partial sense after a little bit why it's so specific, because the gameplay in the game is quite different than most games, but I still don't need to be told to use the right stick to change my camera angle. The controls are wobbly. There's terrible camera angle controls, causing buildings to constantly get in the way. The gameplay idea is pretty unique and cool, but not well executed. There's a circle on the ground around the opponent you are locked onto, and you press A, B, X, or Y buttons according to which side you want to attack on. You can attack from pretty much anywhere on the screen, and Griffin will transport to whichever side of the enemy correlates with the button that you chose. A green curve will show up on one side, and if you correctly attack the corresponding side by using the button that is closest to it, you raise your power bar, which you use to deal more damage to an enemy when the bar is filled enough. But there will also be a side, or two, or sometimes even all sides that turn red. If you attack on the red side, you get knocked down and lose health. When the opponent turns, the red or green sides turn too, and many times they turn very quickly. So between the time that you press a button to when the attack is played out, many times the red will have turned to where you aimed trying to hit the green, and you'll end up losing health. The lock-on circle switches straight to the next opponent after one is down, or you can use the left trigger to switch opponents yourself. You also have a slide attack, but it often misses the target. There's also a jump feature, which allows you to transport anywhere on the screen, but it isn't done too well either. There are lots of easy achievement points to be earned, so if you're trying to build up your gamer score, this might be a game you want to play. But it is very bland looking during the gameplay. There is way too much browns. It is easy to get lost on the screen as you and the enemies are dressed mostly in black and you get lost among them when there are multiples on the screen. The graphics quality doesn't look good enough to be an Xbox 360 title, more like maybe Xbox or PlayStation 2 era, which it did come out on the PlayStation 2, but the version I played is the Xbox 360. The main cutscenes are kind of cool, but there are cutscenes every time more enemies run into a room, which gets super old and boring. You run around each room to collect health bottles, which is great in a pinch. And he runs very quickly, which would be good if the controls weren't so janky, which I ran into a lot of janky controls while making this video. I actually enjoyed this game for a little bit. I didn't finish it, but I did make it about halfway through before putting it down. The uniqueness of the gameplay is what kept me going, but in the end it just wasn't executed properly. So yeah, I do think it deserves a spot on this list. Next we have Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. On the Xbox 360 it is rated at a 25. On the 3DS it is to be determined. So the version I played is for the Xbox 360. The beginning music drew me in pretty quickly. The gameplay is pretty cool. You're able to switch between each of the 4 turtles. Each have a slightly different fighting style and you can pick who you like best and use them the most if you want. Or just continue to switch between the 4. Combat is a little slow, but it's still pretty fun. There are silly sayings throughout, like, "Let's take 5 for some pizza," when you pause. I like the sayings at first, but they are repeated way too much throughout the game. You can trap or smash enemies against the screen with Y, but it's a little finicky. And sending an enemy crashing against the screen makes it very hard to see the enemies that are left. Comic looking words pop up such as smash and thud, and I thought it was a really cool feature to add. The game is too easy and there are a ton of achievements to be earned. Pizza and different food placed throughout the levels increase your health. The turtles that you aren't playing as aren't a lot of help when you're playing single player. You can't skip the cutscenes, which isn't too big a deal because they aren't very long, but if you do die, you don't really want to watch them over again. But like I said, it's a pretty easy game, so you don't have this problem very much. Now I'm going to talk about upgrades. You earn upgrades by collecting glowing orb things, and they actually improve the gameplay. It was becoming a bit monotonous as there were only a couple of attacks to use over and over on every enemy. And though new enemies kept appearing that looked different, they were defeated much the same. Once you get some good upgrades though, there are some new moves to explore, but they are available pretty late in the game. There is still plenty to unlock even after finishing one playthrough, giving it some replayability value. I liked the game. It definitely isn't perfect, the story is mediocre, the combat is kind of slow and repetitive, but the art style is pretty neat. And being able to switch between the turtles is a neat feature that is used fairly well, especially in the final fight. It's a fairly short game, but it's a good thing. If it was any longer, it would become more monotonous and it just would not work. Short, sweet, and to the point. All of this being said, I do not think it deserved a place on the list. I don't think it should be among the top rated games by any means, but I would at least give it a 50 versus a 25. IGN's rating on it was a 5 out of 10, which I would actually lean towards agreeing with them rather than the combined score on Metacritic. It kept me wanting to play it, and that in itself says something when you have a couple of hundred other games that you could be playing instead. I also checked out Mutants in Manhattan, as it is also available on the Xbox 360 and has a significantly better Metacritic score. I just wanted to kind of compare the two and see why one was rated so lowly. I could see why Mutant in Manhattan scores better. The better story and better fighting, better music, and an overall different feel to it. Having set objectives around the city that aren't so straightforward compared to the pretty linear Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. I completed this game, which really says something about it. I enjoyed it pretty much the whole way through, besides a couple of small points, it getting a little bit monotonous, and I'm like, when is this level finally going to be over? Other than that, I had fun with it. And last, I have the lowest rating game in my collection, which is Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22 on the PlayStation 1, scoring a 25 on Metacritic. I hate to say it, as I love Dragon Ball Z, but this game is not good. Combat is slow and choppy. When fighting against a shorter character, you literally punch over their heads, which works when you are the shorter character because you can easily avoid damage, but it just is not done very well. It is called Ultimate Battle 22 because there are 22 characters initially in the game. There are also 5 unlockable characters. 27 characters in a Dragon Ball Z game is nothing compared to more modern games, but is a decent roster of characters. Although there is a decent variety of characters, there aren't very many different moves or combos. Most characters pretty much do the same thing. There are 11 stages that use a combination of 2D and 3D, but this just isn't done too well either. The Japanese version of this game, which came out first in 1995, had cutscenes that were removed for the American release 8 years later. One very notable thing about this not so notable game is that it was well known for the actual cell drawings used by the animators for both the sprites and the cutscenes. And that's it, guys. That's my 5 lowest scoring Metacritic games in my entire collection. This was an interesting little video, quite different from what I usually do, but I thought it'd be a fun addition to the channel. Let me know if you liked it, comment in the comments below, and of course, subscribe for more videos.